Hello and welcome to Nonsense But with Vit. I'm your host Vit, and in this podcast we'll be exploring a wide range of fascinating topics, from music, literature, and art to history, philosophy, politics, science, and everything in between. I'm super excited to dive into these subjects with you and share my thoughts while also learning from your perspectives. This podcast is meant to be an open, fun, and insightful discussion on the ideas and questions that intrigue us. So, who am I and why should you listen to my nonsense? Well, I'm a curious person with diverse interests and a tendency to ponder the absurdities of life. I love learning about how the world works, what makes people tick, and the big questions that don't have easy answers. I'm also a bit of a daydreamer and enjoy making connections between seemingly unrelated things. So, expect a bit of whimsy mixed in with the serious stuff. In each episode, I'll pick a theme and explore it from multiple angles. We might start with a current event, a work of art, or a philosophical idea. Then, I'll take you on a journey through related topics, sharing my thoughts and asking for yours. But here is the really exciting part. I'll be inviting many of my friends as guests onto the show. They come from various backgrounds and have unique experiences that will add depth and diversity to our discussions. Together, we'll explore these topics in ways that are engaging and thought-provoking. To give you a taste of what's to come, let's dive into our first topic: the nature of knowledge and how we come to understand the world. It's a question that has puzzled philosophers for centuries and still sparks debate today. How do we know what we know? Is there objective truth out there waiting to be discovered? Or is all knowledge shaped by our subjective experiences and cultural contexts? What role do reason, empiricism, intuition, and faith play in acquiring knowledge? These are the kinds of questions we'll be grappling with in this episode and throughout the podcast. I'll share my perspective, but I'm also very curious to hear yours. Please feel free to pause the episode at any moment and jot down your thoughts. Alright, let's start with a classic, Plato's allegory of the cave. In this famous thought experiment from the Republic, Plato imagines people chained in a dark cave, only able to see shadows on the wall. They believe these shadows are reality. But one person escapes and sees the true world outside, realizing the shadows were an illusion. For Plato, this represents how most people are trapped in ignorance, mistaking appearances for reality. True knowledge comes from escaping the cave and using reason to grasp eternal, universal truths. The senses are unreliable, he argues, and we must transcend the material world to access higher forms of knowledge. So, in Plato's view, knowledge is not relative or shaped by individual experience. There are objective, immutable truths that exist independently of what any one person thinks or feels. The goal is to use logic and contemplation to discover these truths and free ourselves from ignorance. But Plato's rationalist approach has been challenged by other philosophers who emphasize the role of the senses and empirical observation. Let's take John Locke, for example, the 17th century English philosopher. Locke argued against Plato's theory of innate ideas, saying the mind starts as a tabula rasa, or blank slate. All knowledge comes from sensory experience. So for Locke, we're not born with pre-existing knowledge of eternal truths. Rather, we acquire knowledge through interacting with the world around us. Our minds are shaped by the specific sensations and reflections we have. Knowledge is not universal or absolute, but particular to each individual's experiences. This empiricist view was further developed by David Hume in the 18th century. Hume argued that causality and other supposed necessary connections between ideas are not rationally demonstrable. We can never know for certain that the future will resemble the past. For example, Our belief in causality is based on habit and custom rather than reason. So Hume was skeptical of the idea that we can arrive at objective, certain knowledge through pure reason alone. He argued that even our most basic beliefs about the world are based on habit and sentiment rather than logic. Knowledge is not absolute, but probabilistic and uncertain. These are just a few perspectives on the nature of knowledge. Of course, the debate continues today in various forms. Some argue for a middle ground, saying knowledge involves both reason and empiricism. Others emphasize intuition or social context in shaping what we know. Personally, I do find the empiricist view compelling, that our knowledge is shaped by sensory experience in our particular circumstances in life. At the same time, though, I do believe that there are some universal truths we can discern through reason and shared experience. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How do you think we acquire knowledge? Is there objective truth out there, or is all knowledge relative? What role do senses, reason, intuition, and faith play? Please let me know in the comments or reach out on Instagram. I will be creating an Instagram account for this named Nonsense with Vit. Well, that's it for our first episode of Nonsense but with Vit. I hope you found our discussion on the nature of knowledge interesting and thought-provoking. Please stay tuned for more fascinating topics in future episodes, and don't forget about my amazing friends who will be joining us along this journey. Remember, this podcast is meant to be a fun exploration of ideas, so feel free to share your own thoughts, ask questions, and challenge my perspective. The goal is to learn from each other while appreciating life's complexities. So thank you very much for listening, and until next time, fare thee well.